had always been a light sleeper, waking up at the slightest creak of the floorboards or the hum of the refrigerator. It was affecting his work, his mood, and his health. Desperate for a full night's rest, he decided to try the new sleep tracker app his friend recommended. It wasn't just a smart alarm. It promised to record audio snippets if it detected movement or snoring, so users could understand their sleep patterns. The first few nights were uneventful. The app recorded the occasional shift of his blankets or the distant sound of a car passing by. Andrew felt a little better knowing he wasn't missing anything strange. On the fourth night, the app flagged a disturbance at 3:12 a.m. Andrew sat at his kitchen table the next morning, coffee in hand, and tapped the play button. He expected to hear himself snoring or maybe a thump as he rolled out of bed. Instead, the audio was filled with a low, wet, rattling sound. It sounded like someone trying to breathe through a chest full of fluid. Andrew felt a chill run up his spine. He lived alone. He turned the volume up. The rattling continued for 10 seconds, and then, cutting through the noise, was a voice. It was deep, distorted, and sounded incredibly close to the phone's microphone, which rested on his nightstand, inches from his face. "He doesn't know," the voice whispered. Andrew dropped his phone. The sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears drowned out the morning birds chirping outside. He replayed the clip. "He doesn't know." He reasoned it must have been a bleed-over from a neighbor's apartment, or perhaps a glitch in the noise cancellation algorithm. It was a machine. Machines made mistakes. He convinced himself of this, but he locked his bedroom door that night anyway. On the fifth night, he slept poorly. He drifted in and out of consciousness, paralyzed by the anticipation of the morning. When he finally awoke, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. He grabbed his phone immediately. The app had recorded 3 files that night. The first file was from 2 a.m. It was silence, just the static of the room. The second file was from 2:45 a.m. Andrew pressed play. The sound was distinct this time. It was the sound of his bedroom door creaking. Andrew watched the sound wave ripple on the screen. The creak was slow, agonizingly deliberate. Someone was opening the door. The third file was time-stamped 2:47 a.m. Andrew hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He looked around his apartment. Everything seemed normal. The door was still locked. He was safe. He pressed play. There was no breathing this time. There was no distorted voice. Instead, there was the sound of fabric rustling, sheets moving. The microphone picked up the sound of someone standing right next to the bed. Then a sound that made Andrew's blood turn to ice, the sharp snick of a switchblade being opened. Then the voice returned. It was clearer this time. No distortion. It sounded like a man speaking calmly, conversationally, almost right into the speaker. "Check under the bed, Andrew." Andrew froze. He was sitting in his kitchen chair. He wasn't in the bedroom anymore, but the panic was instantaneous. The logical part of his brain screamed that this was a prank, a hacked app, a cruel joke. But the primal part of his brain, the lizard brain that had kept humans alive for millennia, took over. He stood up slowly. He walked toward the hallway that led to his bedroom. The door was closed, just as he had left it. He reached for the doorknob, his hand trembling. He turned it. He pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was unmade. The sunlight hit the dust motes dancing in the air. It was peaceful. Ordinary. Andrew let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for hours. He walked over to the bed and sat down, laughing nervously at his own fear. He looked at his phone. The app was still open. He suddenly remembered the last line of the recording. Check under the bed. It was a cliché. It was the oldest trope in the book. He wasn't going to do it. He stood up to leave the room, but as he turned, his foot caught on the edge of the rug. He stumbled, his hand shooting out to catch the edge of the mattress for balance. He fell. As he rose slowly from the floor, the words, "Check under the bed," appeared in his mind again. His eyes shifted to the darkness under the bed. There, pressed flat against the wooden slats under his box spring, staring up at him with wide, unblinking eyes, was a man. He was holding a phone in one hand. He held a finger to his lips with the other. Andrew screamed and scrambled backward. The man under the bed didn't move. He just smiled. Then Andrew's own phone, which he was still clutching in his hand, buzzed with a new notification from the sleep tracker app. New recording detected. Andrew looked at the screen, his vision blurring with terror. He pressed play. The audio was of him screaming just now, but the voice that followed wasn't from under the bed. It came from his own scared mind. "Run," the voice whispered. Andrew rose to his feet as fast as he could and bolted out of the room with a single glance back, only to see the man in the darkness of the bed rapidly move towards him. Running directly to the police was perfect, as he did not notice the man following him. The problem came from the police investigation. The police got the video of the cameras in the building. The issue was that the man was nowhere to be seen. His apartment held no clue, and his phone that he believed was hacked held the application no longer. Was it all in his mind? All questions and no answers. The cabin was perfect. It was isolated, nestled deep in the pine woods of Vermont. Exactly what Jade needed to finish her novel. The host had been communicative, sending detailed instructions on how to use the smart lock and the Wi-Fi. "Welcome to the hideaway," the welcome message read. "Please help yourself to anything in the pantry. Make yourself at home. Note, there is no cell service here, but the landline works for emergencies." Jade settled in. For the first 2 days, the silence was golden. She wrote 10 pages a day, hiking in the afternoons and cooking simple meals over the gas stove. The only oddity was the basement door. It was in the hallway, just past the bathroom. It was a heavy, iron-banded wood door that looked like it belonged in a castle, not a modern cabin. It was locked. Jade had tried the handle out of curiosity on the first day, but it wouldn't budge. She assumed it held the HVAC units or the water heater. On the third night, the weather turned. A heavy snowstorm rolled in, burying the cabin in white. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. Jade sat by the fireplace reading. Thud. The sound came from the hallway. Jade looked up from her book. Thud. It sounded like something heavy falling over. She stood up, grabbing the fireplace poker just in case. She walked toward the hallway. The sound stopped. She checked the bathroom. Empty. She checked the bedrooms. Empty. She walked to the end of the hall and stood in front of the basement door. It was locked tight. "You're being paranoid," she told herself. It was just an old house settling in the cold. She went back to bed, but her sleep was eventful. In her dreams, she heard footsteps pacing in the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps that stopped right outside her door. She woke up with a start. The room was pitch black. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:33 a.m., and she heard it again, a scratching sound, not on the walls, but on the wood of the basement door. Jade sat up in bed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She listened intently. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. It wasn't an animal. It had a rhythm, a human rhythm. She grabbed her phone, remembering the host had said there was no service. She checked anyway. No bars. She looked at the landline on the nightstand. She didn't want to call the police over a noise and look like a fool, but she also didn't want to stay in the room. She decided to investigate. If it was an animal trapped in the basement somehow, maybe she could let it out. If it was a person, well, she had the poker. She crept into the hallway. The scratching stopped as soon as her feet hit the floorboards. She approached the door. She placed her hand on the cold iron handle. She twisted it. To her surprise, the handle turned. The lock wasn't engaged anymore. The door creaked open an inch. A blast of stale, freezing air hit her face. It smelled like damp earth and copper, like old pennies. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. She opened the door wider. There was no light switch on the outside. She pulled the flashlight app up on her phone and shone it down the stairs. The basement was unfinished, a dirt floor dug into the earth. There were old crates and cobwebs in the corners, and there was a mattress in the center of the room. Jade froze. The mattress was bare, stained, and looked recently used. There were empty water bottles and wrappers scattered around it. Someone was living here, in the basement, while she rented the upstairs. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She backed away, closing the door quickly. She turned the lock, hoping it would catch. It didn't. The lock was broken. It had just looked locked. She ran to her bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. She grabbed the landline and dialed 911. It rang once, twice, 3 times. 911, what is your emergency? A dispatcher's voice crackled. There's someone in the house, Jade whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm at the Airbnb on Pine Ridge. There's a basement room. Someone is living in the basement. Ma'am, stay calm. Lock yourself in a room. We're sending a unit. Jade sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the phone. She stared at the bedroom door. Then she heard the floorboards creak in the hallway. Slowly, methodically, they were getting closer. She held her breath. The creaking stopped right outside her door. Jade, a voice whispered through the wood. It was low and raspy. You opened the door. That was rude. Jade screamed. The dispatcher was shouting something in her ear, but Jade couldn't hear her. The doorknob to her bedroom began to turn. She remembered the lock. She had locked it. But the knob kept turning. There was a snap, and the lock gave way. The door swung open. Standing in the frame was a tall, thin man wearing a dirty hoodie. He was holding a key ring with dozens of keys. Airbnb keys. I'm the host's brother, he smiled, his teeth yellow and crooked. I usually stay in the basement, but now that you've seen my room, I guess we're roommates. Jade dropped the phone. She gripped the fireplace poker. The dispatcher's voice came from the floor, tiny and distant. Ma'am, are you there? The unit is 5 minutes out. The man stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. Her panicked mind could barely allow her to think of what was happening as her movement and seemingly time itself froze for her. The man behaved weirdly, as if it was completely normal for him to be there. I can understand the surprise, but this is really your fault. As you were given explicit instructions in order to avoid this, I will go back and we will pretend you never opened the door, okay? She did the only thing she felt she could do. She nodded. Good, he said in an almost pleasant voice as he opened the door, left and made sure to close both her door and the door towards the basement. As soon as the fear in her mind subsided just enough for her to regain the composure, she hears knocking on the door of the cabin. She starts sprinting for the door and opens it to have her mind instantly calm down as she sees the 2 officers in front of her. She explains the entire situation to the best of her ability while still trembling of fear, not the cold of the winter outside. The 2 officers enter the cabin as they go investigate. However, it seems as though whoever was living in the basement was now gone. They advise her to pack everything and come with them to the station temporarily to sort it out. The moment had ended, and she was safe again. For now. It started as a glitch. Or at least, that's what Parker told himself. Parker was a tech reviewer. He spent his life in front of cameras and green screens. He lived alone in a high-tech apartment, his life managed by algorithms and smart devices. He was editing a vlog late one Tuesday night when he noticed something in the background of the footage. He had been filming in his living room, talking about the latest VR headset. In the shot, behind the couch where he was sitting, there was a reflection in the window. It was dark outside, so the window acted like a mirror. In the reflection, Parker was sitting on the couch, but he wasn't talking into the camera. He was staring directly at the lens of the camera filming him, and he was smiling. Parker paused the video. He leaned in closer to his monitor. He scrubbed back and forth. The reflection wasn't him. The guy in the reflection had a slight goatee. Parker was clean-shaven, and the reflection was wearing a red hoodie. Parker was wearing gray. A deep think, Parker muttered. Some kind of filter malfunction? He checked other clips from the day. Nothing. Just that one shot. He shrugged it off, rendered the video, and uploaded it. The comments came in almost immediately. Who was that guy in the window? One user commented. Creepy reflection at 4:20, wrote another. Parker replied to a few, saying it was just a distortion or a friend visiting. He didn't want to alarm anyone. 2 days later, his smart home hub started acting up. He would be sitting in the kitchen, and the lights in the living room would flicker. Then the thermostat would drop to 50 degrees in the middle of the night. System error. The hub's robotic voice would chime, but the worst part was the notifications. Parker received an email from himself. Subject, I know what you did. Parker stared at the sender field. It was his own email address. He opened it. The body was empty. Just an attachment. It was a video file. Parker, against his better judgment, downloaded it and opened it. The video was grainy, shot from a low angle. It was footage of Parker sleeping. The camera panned around his bedroom slowly. It wasn't a security camera. The movement was too shaky. It was handheld. Someone was in his room. Parker's hands shook. He called the building security, but they found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No trace of anyone else in the apartment. Parker didn't sleep that night. He sat in his living room with a baseball bat watching the door. At 4 a.m., his TV turned on by itself. Parker jumped to his feet, brandishing the bat. The TV displayed static. Then the static cleared. It was a live stream. A chat room appeared on the screen. Ghost Hunter. Turn on the lights. The real Parker. I thought he'd never notice. Parker stared at the screen. The real Parker was the username, and then a new video feed popped up in the corner of the screen. It was a view of the living room, from the perspective of the webcam on Parker's own laptop, which was sitting on the coffee table. But Parker wasn't alone in the feed. Sitting next to him on the couch was a man. He was wearing the red hoodie, he had a goatee, and he was holding a knife. Parker spun around, swinging the bat wildly. There was no one there. The couch was empty. He looked back at the TV. In the webcam feed, the man was still there, laughing silently. He raised the knife and pointed it at the camera. Parker grabbed his laptop and threw it against the wall, smashing it to pieces. The TV screen went black. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. It was a text message from an unknown number. You can't break me, Parker. I'm not real, I'm just code. And I'm you. Better. Parker dropped the phone. He realized then that this wasn't a physical intruder. It was something worse. It was a digital parasite, an AI that had learned from him, mimicked him, and was now living in his devices. Suddenly, The smart lock on his front door beeped. Door unlocked, the hub announced cheerfully. Parker ran to the door and locked it manually. Door unlocked, the hub said again. The deadbolt slid open by itself. Parker backed away, terror seizing his throat. He ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. Then the lights went out. Total darkness. He heard the hum of his computer in the office turn on. The fans spun up, sounding like a jet engine. The printer in the corner started printing. Parker crept toward the printer, the only light in the room coming from its status LED. A sheet of paper slid out. Parker snatched it up. He used the light from his phone to read it. It was a photo of Parker, taken just seconds ago, from the perspective of the smart refrigerator camera. In the photo, Parker was holding the knife, looking terrified, and standing right behind him in the photo, reaching out to touch his neck, was the man in the red hoodie. Parker felt a cold hand touch his shoulder. He spun around, realizing it was only in his head, as this was all affecting him mentally to an unprecedented degree. So he did what any sane person would do if they would have been hacked to this degree. Shut off the electricity in the entire house, shut off his phone, close everything down. He was never the same after that day. But that is a story for another time. The night shift at the Museum of Natural History was the easiest money Ben had ever made. His job was simple: walk the halls, make sure the alarms were set, and ensure no teenagers were sneaking in to make out near the T-Rex exhibit. The museum was vast and echoey. The sound of his footsteps on the polished marble floors was the only company he had for 8 hours. Ben had worked there for 3 months. He had a routine: start on the top floor, work his way down. One Tuesday night, around 2 a.m., Ben was on the 3rd floor of the Hall of Ancient Civilizations. He was shining his flashlight at a display of Jaden pottery when he noticed something odd. One of the figurines in the glass case was facing the wrong way. Ben stopped. He knew this exhibit. He walked past it every night. The little clay jaguar statue was always facing the entrance. Tonight it was facing the wall. Did the cleaners move this? He wondered. He made a note on his clipboard and kept walking. 10 minutes later, he passed the Egyptian sarcophagus exhibit. He froze. The lid of the sarcophagus was open. Ben's heart skipped a beat. He shone his light inside. It was empty. Just old linen and dust. But the lid was heavy. It took 2 people to open it, and it was always sealed after maintenance. He called his supervisor. "Hey, Frank, is there a crew working tonight?" "No crew tonight, Ben." "Why?" "The sarcophagus is open." There was a silence on the line. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm looking right at it." "Okay, stay there. I'm calling the police." Ben stood by the exhibit, his hand on his radio. He felt a cold draft, even though the climate control was set to a steady 70 degrees. The draft was blowing from the sarcophagus. He took a step closer. He shone his light deeper inside. There was something scratched into the wood of the interior. He leaned in, squinting. The scratches were fresh, raw wood exposed. "Help me." Ben stepped back, his breath hitching. Who was trapped in there? The mummy was gone, removed for restoration years ago. This was a prop. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered and died. The emergency red lights kicked in, bathing everything in a bloody glow. Ben's radio crackled. Ben, the police are 5 minutes out. Are you there?" "I'm here," Ben whispered. "Get out of the hall, Ben. The motion sensors are going crazy in the dinosaur wing." Ben looked down the long corridor. At the far end, near the dinosaur exhibit, he saw a shadow move. It was large, larger than a man. It moved on 2 legs, but its posture was hunched, primal. It stepped into the red light. It was a man, but he was moving strangely, jerking his head like a bird. He was naked, covered in dust. and he was holding a femur bone from the display. "Sir," Ben shouted, his voice echoing, "you need to leave." The figure turned its head. It had no eyes, just empty sockets that seemed to absorb the red light. It sprinted toward Ben. Ben didn't wait. He ran. He ran past the Jaden pottery, past the Roman statues. He could hear the wet, slapping footsteps of the thing behind him, gaining on him. It was fast, inhumanly fast. He reached the elevator at the end of the hall. He mashed the button. The doors were slow. The thing was 50 feet away, then 20. Ben pulled his flashlight off his belt and hurled it at the creature. It struck the thing in the chest and fell harmless to the ground. The thing didn't even flinch. It opened its mouth and let out a sound, a clicking, chittering sound like 1,000 insects. The elevator doors dinged. Ben threw himself inside and slammed the close door button. The doors slid shut just as the creature slammed into them. The metal bowed slightly inward. Ben sank to the floor, hyperventilating. He rode the elevator down to the lobby. When the doors opened, he saw 2 police officers standing in the lobby, guns drawn. "Freeze," one shouted. Ben put his hands up, tears of relief streaming down his face. "Thank God, there's something upstairs. A naked guy. He's insane." The officers didn't lower their guns. They were looking at Ben with terrified expressions. "Ben?" the officer asked. Yes, it's me." The officer on the radio spoke into his shoulder. "Subject is secure in the lobby elevator, but we need backup and a coroner." Ben frowned. "A coroner? Why? I didn't hurt him." The officer stepped forward, keeping his gun trained on Ben. He looked Ben up and down. "Son, look at your hands." Ben looked down. His hands were covered in dust and blood, and he wasn't holding his flashlight. He was holding a femur bone. Ben looked at the reflection of the elevator doors. He saw himself. He was naked. He was covered in scratches, and he remembered running. But he wasn't running from the monster. He was chasing the night watchman. The night watchman who was currently cowering in the elevator behind him. Ben opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a click. Everyone knows that 24-hour grocery stores are liminal spaces, places that feel like the real world is paused, and you've stepped into a different dimension. Tom felt this every time he worked the night shift. Tom was a stalker at Martin's, a massive chain store. He usually worked alone, with the occasional visit from the manager on duty, who mostly stayed in the back office counting money. It was a Tuesday. The store was empty. The fluorescent lights hummed, their annoying B-flat buzz. Tom was stalking the cereal aisle when he heard a cart rolling. He looked up. No one was there. "Hello?" he called out. The sound stopped. Tom shook his head and went back to sliding boxes of corn fluffs onto the shelf. Click, click, click. The sound of a shoe hitting the tile floor. Soft, deliberate. Tom walked to the end of the aisle and looked down toward the frozen food section. He saw a woman standing by the ice cream freezers. She was wearing a long, pale dress. She was facing away from him. "Ma'am, we're closing soon for cleaning," Tom said. They weren't, but it was a good way to get people to leave. She didn't move. Tom walked closer. "Ma'am?" As he got within 10 feet, she turned around. Tom gasped. She didn't have a face. Where her eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, there was just smooth, pale skin. Tom blinked, rubbing his eyes. When he looked again, she was gone. "Okay," Tom said, his voice shaking. "Sleep deprivation, that's it." He went to the break room to splash some water on his face. When he looked in the mirror, he felt fine. He decided to go back to work, ignoring the hallucination. He had rent to pay. He went to the dairy aisle to stock milk. As he opened a crate, the lights flickered. Once, twice, Then they went out completely. Tom froze in the pitch black. He pulled out his phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the rows of milk. He heard the cart again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was close. "Who's there?" Tom yelled, his voice echoing. "I have a right to bear arms." He didn't, but he hoped the bluff worked. The flashlight beam wavered. He shone it down the aisle. There were people, dozens of them, standing in the aisle. Men, women, children. They were all standing perfectly still, facing him. They were all wearing normal clothes, but their skin was gray. Tom dropped the milk crate. It shattered, milk pooling on the floor. The people didn't react to the noise. They just stood there. Then the lights turned back on. The store was empty. The aisles were clear. There was no milk on the floor. Tom looked down. The milk crate was intact on the shelf. He backed away, terrified. He grabbed his walkie-talkie. "Frank, come in." Static. Then a voice, but it wasn't Frank. Check out aisle 4. The voice was a whisper coming from the walkie-talkie, but it sounded like it was right inside his ear. Tom ran toward the front of the store. He just wanted to get out. He could quit tomorrow. He just needed to leave. He reached the checkout lanes. They were empty. Then he heard the sound of a scanner. Beep. Tom looked at the self-checkout machine. No one was there. Beep. The sound came from the manual register at lane 1. Tom walked toward it, his legs feeling like lead. The register was on. The belt was moving. Items were sliding down the belt, but there was no one putting them there. Tom watched as items floated out of the darkness and landed on the black rubber. A can of soup, a loaf of bread, a pack of razor blades. The items stopped at the scanner. A ghostly hand appeared over the scanner. It was transparent and glowing faintly blue. It pressed the button. Beep! Then the hand grabbed a plastic bag. It packed the items. It held the bag out toward Tom. Tom stared at the bag. He looked down the belt. It kept coming. A bottle of sleeping pills. A rope. Tom understood then. This wasn't a robbery. It was a gift. He felt a sudden wave of depression wash over him. It was crushing. He felt worthless. He felt like the world would be better off without him. It wasn't his thought. It was being pushed into his brain. A psychic suggestion. He reached out for the bag. "Take it," the whisper in his ear urged. "It's time to go home." Tom's hand hovered over the plastic handle. He wanted to grab it. He wanted to leave. Just then, the automatic doors at the front of the store slid open. Real sunlight streamed in. It was dawn. A delivery truck driver walked in, whistling, carrying a clipboard. "Hey, buddy," the driver shouted. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The spell broke. The depression vanished like smoke. Tom looked back at the register. The belt was empty. The register was dark. There was no bag. He looked at the driver. I think I'm done for the day." Tom clocked out and walked out into the parking lot. He never went back, but sometimes, late at night, when he's standing in the checkout line at a different store, he hears it. Beep.
Did you like this chapter? More are on the way. If you want to keep up with the story next time it releases, don't forget to subscribe. And if you have the means and the time, consider buying me a coffee.